Hello, and welcome back to yet another episode of the DD Geopolitics podcast. I am joined by JM and Lydia, of course, and our guest for today is the creative genius, Igor Lopatonok, producer of the groundbreaking documentaries Ukraine on Fire, Revealing Ukraine, and the latest two-parter Agent Zelensky with Scott Ritter. Igor, how are you? It's been a little while.
Hello. Thank you for inviting me again. It's all the time a big pleasure for me. Everything good, and I'm congratulating the Scott with releasing of his new film. What I take participation and I believe make some input in this such an important topic.
Yeah, so let's dig right into it. Your latest film. Well, let's do a little. Let's not get in the weeds because we did that last episode, but a little bit of Ukraine on Fire and Revealing Ukraine for our listeners that maybe have not seen it. I really hope we don't have that many that haven't seen it, but we'll link you anyway. What started? It was with Oliver Stone. What kind of started the ball rolling in this, like really digging into the meat and potatoes of Ukraine politics?
Yeah, Ukraine on Fire celebrating. It's already 7 years. We lately was mentioned by Fox News. They find out this is a big movie about Ukrainian roots of Ukrainian crisis. When Oliver was on a talk show with a British comedian, I forget the name. Oh my God! And he mentioned Ukraine on Fire. So Fox skip all what Oliver talked about his latest documentary film Nuclear Now, about nuclear energy, and they citate him mostly about Ukrainian film. Yeah, and they find out that's this is a movie here. 7 years. Yeah, but the movie is working pretty well. I very proud to be a director. Yeah, I'm very proud. And I want to thank you one more time, Oliver, because he forced me to direct it. I has no intention to direct that film. Yes, it was my debut because we go shopping for the big director. We talk to Werner Herzog, Errol Morris, even thinking about Michael Moore. But Oliver tell me, Igor, no, nobody from this great directors, really great. They did amazing documentaries. They know nothing about Ukraine. You know practically everything. You speak language, you grown up in country, you move to States, you know how to make the films. You need to direct it. I said, oh, Oliver, but I never did it. I think I'm not ready. I'm not ready. Because in my dreams, I was a director, but I think that's such a complicated skill to tell story properly, to engage with the audience, and to be not only but be metaphorical. So I can compare it to the current situation. We have two big movies in release now in the United States. One of that called Barbie, sorry, and they make already $1 billion, and another one amazing movie of Christopher Nolan, Oppenheimer. I recently watched Oppenheimer. I was expecting a masterpiece from Chris Nolan, but I never expect that's so good, because it's timely as any time yet, because we need to be scared about nuclear war, and that movie delivered a good message for everyone. I can say only, as Oliver said, bravo, Chris Nolan. In my ratings of film directors, he was already in top 10, but now he's rising because he was courageous enough to tell the story about how warmongers and politicians abusing the scientific achievements and making our world more dangerous than it was before. And that message is very timely because, with our films, all our 4 films on Ukrainian subject, and we start with a small one called Maidan Massacre. We did it in 2014 when the footprints on a Maidan was still hot, and we deployed a team of cinematographers who film and who investigate the scene of that crime, killing of 49 people in a cool blood. And we find out that with exclusion of few, they was killed by protesters, by hired guns from a protester side. So the opposition who's arranging this coup, together with the help of famous Victoria Nuland and other people, like a Payat, ambassador to Ukraine of United States and others, they was giving them instruction to do this because they need to steer the media attention around the world. It was a tremendous crime committed with the help of masters of the coup, and they break the chain of Slavic people. They arrange the coup d'etat, armed coup d'etat in Ukraine, and after the coup d'etat exists, and in the final stages of coup, that they already start pumping up anti-Russian narration and put Putin on the signs and blaming him for everything. But Russia is all the time economically very helpful to Ukraine. Ukraine benefit a lot from the discounts on the natural gas, etc., etc. And it was a market for Ukrainian goods, what Ukraine produced. And they start blaming this for Ukraine enslaved by Russia, etc., etc. It's all bullshit. Ukrainian economy thrive only because they have the market for they produced goods in Russia, and that was a big benefit for Ukraine. So the idea to join Europe and sign a trade association with Europe was not discussed with, and it's actually what you can see in the Ukrainian fire. Putin himself explained it to us. We got the close to 1 hour length interview with him, which Oliver conducted in 2015 when he just started working on a documentary film, Putin interview with Putin. It was funny that it was a different name, and for that film that was Mr. P initially, like in a working title. But when Showtime released it, they choose like a more mainstream, like interview with Putin. And this movie by very good success because the publicity of Putin, how that's presented by Western media, is totally different than its reality is. And people interested to find out what is that man. Oliver have tremendous access. For 2 years, 2015, 16, and 17, they met in different locations more than 9 times. Each interview was more than 2 hours length. And they did 4 episodes. Great film. And we did Ukrainian Fire. We released it in 2016 because we don't want to affect release of Snowden. Actually, now I'm thinking differently. We need to release it first. We will hit up the market for the Snowden. But at this time, we believe in that the Snowden need to go first. And that's take us a long time to release. We released it in the Taormina Film Festival in June 2016. We got an award for the best documentary. And from this time, for now, audience of film crossed the 400 millions around the world. Film translated in more than 35 languages by the audience. They want to have it in their own language, such as rare languages like Vietnamese and Slovenian, etc. And I'm really proud about Ukrainian Fire. We decided to make a sequel in 2018 because situation was developing and it was a last chance to change the course through election process. And we secured the access to the leader of opposition in Ukraine, Viktor Medvedchuk. And together with Oliver, we also interview Putin for that film. And we make the film. All our films is anti-war film because the ending is very clear. It's a message in a desperate attempt to prevent hostile actions, to prevent unthinkable, to prevent war. And even more than it's war now, we are believing that's a big danger of direct confrontation of NATO and Russia or United States and Russia, and this tremendous danger for entire human civilization. because we never experienced a direct war with the nuclear superpowers. We experienced it from the very beginning of Cold War proxy conflicts, as it was in Korea, as it was in Vietnam, Afghanistan, and now in Ukraine. But we never experienced a direct confrontation. And I still believe this is a direct confrontation. This is a doom for our civilization. This is why we make that films. And in 2021, for the 30 years of anniversary of Ukraine, we make a fourth part, what calls long time, like Ukraine, 30 years of independence, the everlasting present. So that means again and again, the same things happen to Ukraine again and again. And we speak with 11 speakers, we cut off 2. By the way, there's an interesting detail. We cut off Director of Military Intelligence of Ukraine, Mr. Malamush, and we cut off Nadezhda Savchenko. We interview them, but we don't take them to the film. But we was happy to have President Yushchenko, and I want somebody who know nothing to conduct interview, because if it will be Oliver, all the pro Ukrainian forces will be declined the interview. So I choose very smart, but absolutely innocent in the knowledge of Ukraine lady, my friend and the wife of George Papadopoulos, Simona Mangiante Papadopoulos. And she did great. She did, like, you know, when when she just stepped in a Borispol airport, her shoe was broken. And I said, oh, Simona, this is a good sign. Because in Russian we have that idiom when you broke your shoes. I mean, you're working, you're ready to work very hard. And yeah, that movie was released in 2021. It's very dark and not very much happy film. But we need to say that. So well-being of Ukrainians diminished, decreased after that events in 2014. All dreams about European families and etc. It's like, it's nonsense. It's just chimera what's planted in the Ukrainian minds, and war is coming. So in this, I use metaphor playing with fire from Ukrainian fire. I actually very metaphorical in my documentaries. I was blamed for that in the beginning. Only one person who tell me, Igor, you need to do as you want. It was Oliver Stone, because all my team, all my producers and others who helped me with Ukrainian fire asking me, oh, why are you doing this? Naked woman dancing in the fire, what is that about? And I tell them, listen, this is a metaphor about what's Ukraine doing. They dancing, they playing with the fire, they curious about fire, and after that fire start burning. And Oliver was right. Yeah, of course, everybody love it. Even people who don't like the film and hate the film much, and me, myself, and call myself Russian agent, they love our fire dance in Ukrainian fire. So we continue with another metaphor in that the everlasting present, when young people jumping over the fire. That's a national, it's a kind of folk celebration called Day of Ivana Kupala, when the boys and girls jump into the fire, and it's like a ritual to clean them. It's not Christian ritual, it's come from before Christian times, but still exists in the Russian culture. And we show our firebirds. And this is a metaphor for everybody who warmongering, who's hawks, but this is a bird of fire who bring the fire to innocent life, to peaceful life, and make it all burn. And we see that exactly now in Ukraine, and I'm so sad about this, because all our desperate attempt to speak to people, to change their minds, fail. We try hard, very much hard, but we fail because forces was standing against us, very well funded, very well organized, and they very skillful in the people minds manipulation. That's it. This is my films.
So
And let's talk about the Scott, because Scott made
what
a first debut. Yeah.
what so you guys just said, you know what, like enough is enough, it's time to like really lay it all out there, everything about this guy. Is that like, because I watched the films and I consider myself a pretty close follower of Zelensky and the political machinations of the Ukraine. But I was, some of the stuff, even I was like, oh my God. Oh my God. And I was like messaging people at the same time, like, did you know that? Zelensky, blah, 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 blah. They're like, oh my God. So what made you guys decide like the time is, it keeps getting banned, by the way. It's like, I gotta keep finding it and directing people to it. So you know it's good if it keeps getting banned. So
Yeah,
what
we just found it on Rumble. We had to link it on the channel because we posted the YouTube links and they got removed, of course. And so we found it on Rumble and had to change that, but hopefully it will stay there because it's something that everyone definitely needs to watch. We all watched it, all of our team. Actually, some of us several times because it really is very interesting and a very easy watch in a good way. So it's easy to understand. And for me personally, because I'm someone who works in marketing, it was very interesting and close to my heart. A lot of the things that were mentioned there and how they used it to spin the narrative.
Yeah, it's a good film. It's a good film. And I congratulate Scott because first time he make a debut in a film. It's well done. The production value, as my friend George Allison tell me, oh, did you help him with the camera? Because I never see him so good looking. So, no, it's not my production. I contribute for the film. But Scott definitely a great guy who has a courage to talk. I was accused in everything what we was accused for years before, standing still and do not take the shit seriously and keep exposing the Zelensky. Yeah, we touched Zelensky in revealing Ukraine a little bit, but we just show his promises to stop the war in Donbass. What he was in his inaugurational speech, he promised in our first goal to stop the war in Donbass. He failed, of course, and I believe that was not his first goal, but he used it a lot during his presidential campaign. And as soon as the power is secured, and in 1 year, Zelensky was completely corrupted by the West first, and he also was cornered by radical Ukrainian nationalists. So what Scott doing is very good because Scott showing to the Western audience who Zelensky is really and how he serving not his own nation. What's the biggest problem with Zelensky? What he is not the statesman and not serving Ukrainian nation. Because the first goal of every statesman is to avoid the war, a slaughtering of his own nation by more powerful adversary. And there's no doubt that Russia is more powerful. Russia is a nuclear superpower with economy bigger and 20 times than Ukrainian, and with the human resources at least 5 times bigger. And this is biggest problem, that Zelensky is not serving his nation. Actually, doing so, he completely illegitimate now as a president of Ukraine. He need to be treated as an authoritarian dictator who grabbed the power. And people changing. Especially, I need to point out. I say it in a film, Scott film, but I need to point out that again, actors have these qualities of them, then they so sink into the character, they start believing and associating themselves with the character. So the character of Zelensky was a president of Ukraine, and he is an actor. So he's so sink in this, he believing now He's not only president of Ukraine, but he is a man who is the only hope of free Europe and free world, who facing the evil and who fighting within with all might. Only one little thing, what he's forgetting. He's slaughtering my fellow Ukrainians in a huge amount. Nobody else in Ukrainian history was caused such a tremendous human losses as Zelensky. Yeah.
I'm just, as I was listening to you, I was just really deep in thought, because for any Russian, this war is very personal. And the reason why I like your movies so much is that it's something that you can show to a lot of the foreign people who actually have no idea about the background, because pretty much everyone in Russia is aware of how all these things happened,
Yes.
and why we are where we are. But a lot of people, they're clueless, and this is why I like that it's something that you can show and people can learn about things in a very condensed way. And actually today I was rewatching your movies to prepare for the podcast, and it's a very sobering experience to think about Ukraine and what it could have been, because it had so much potential, and none of this had to happen. I don't think on the person to person level anyone really wanted it to happen, and it's a big wound for both of our societies. And yeah, I just can't help but being very, very sad when I think about these things and how we tried for years to prevent it, but then ultimately we couldn't succeed.
Yes, that's most sad part. But another point of view, we need to understand that tactic was chosen because in a direct confrontation, this is impossible to overcome the Russians. They have the history when the huge losses only happened when they start fighting each other. That was happening in Kiev and Rus when the old dukes fight each other and weakened the state, the union, and this is what's happening now. They choose the weak chain in this family of Slavic people, and they invest heavily in this chain to rise the differences, and after that they implement it and they steer the war. Investing heavily, I'm talking about CIA operation from end of World War II, starting with Operation Trident and so on, until latest. And even early history was a dreamers in Europe existing who want to have to carve part of Great Russian Empire and to make their own kingdoms. I'm talking about the William Gabsburg, who was a spiritual teacher of Stepan Bandera, and that guy who was 16 in a line to inherit for Austro-Hungarian throne of Gabsburg has no chance to be the emperor. He look on Ukraine and think, oh, look, we can make a kingdom from Ukraine. And under the umbrella of Austro-Hungarian Empire, we can carve it out of Russia and establish myself as a king. Ukrainians call him Vasil Vyshyvany because he wear the shorts, what's called Vyshyvanka in Ukrainian. And he failed in everything. He was arrested finally after the war for collaboration with the Nazi, and ended up in a Russian prisoner camp and died in there. But he left behind the legacy of Bandera because Bandera was working to him from the time when Bandera was a young kid, and he was a member of Plast. This is a youth radical organization. They mostly fight against Poland, Polish, because Poles was the masters of Ukraine and the Western Ukraine at this time. And he ended up with organizing of terror acts against the Minister of Internal Affairs of Poland, and they killed the guy. And after that, he was prosecuted for that and put in a jail. He was released from a jail right before the World War II started, and already actively collaborated with the Abwehr, what is the military intelligence of Nazi Germany, and use Ukrainian nationalists to help Nazi in their fight against Soviet Union. And as soon as Stepan Bandera was there to announce the independent Ukrainian, you call it UNR, Ukrainian People Republic, he was immediately jailed now by Germans, and spent entire World War II sitting in a camp, but with allowed communication to his all followers and subordinates. So he was just protected, seated in this camera and working from the camera. After he was released and managed to escape, he lived in Germany under fictitious name. When the KGB find him and kill him in the 50s. That a story of meddling and investing into the Ukrainian so-called independence, because before that 300 years Ukraine, from the time of Bogdan Khmelnytsky, who chose to join the Russian Empire because he was after a prison of Zaporozhye Cossacks, and trying to fight against Crimean Tatars, joining the force together with Crimean Tatars against Poland, fighting against Poland, and understanding when they broke the union with the Tatars, he will be destroyed by Poles. He came to the Russian Tsar and asked them to unite and to take Ukraine in the Russian Empire. And it was not easy decision for the Russians. They make a lot of consultations, they make a lot of gathering, more than, I believe, few years they decided, and they find, because for them that was mean a war with a Poland immediate. And they finally in the Pereyaslav Rada, it's a town close by to Kiev, that was announcement of that unification of Ukraine and Russia, and Russia go at war with Poland. And this is how 300 years of together with the Russian Empire, Russia invest in everything in Ukraine as an own home. They build an industry, they build a culture, they even, leaders of Ukrainian independence like Taras Shevchenko, they were studying in an academy in St. Petersburg. They was financed by the Russian people. And it's ended up in the short independence period in the 1918, when Russia was facing the consequences of revolution, and the World War I was coming to the end, and Germany grabbed the chance and enforced a very, very brutal for Russians Brest-Litovsky peace agreement, when Ukraine go under the German protectorate. And for the Russians, it was only one solution, because they understand they have no power to fight Germany now, so they agreed on these humiliating conditions. But it's take only 2 years to build the army, and the Red Army together with all rebellions against that independent Ukraine government happened. And of course, in Ukraine, there was quick changes of leaders. Petlura come and go, Skoropadsky come and go. So that's ended up in 2021, and in 2022, that I believe Ukraine was one of 4 republic was formed the Soviet Union and signed an agreement. What's ridiculous, because I study the history of Soviet Union and Ukraine and Communist Party of Soviet Union all my childhood and in university. Now Ukrainians start calling these Soviet times as an occupation by Russians. Can you imagine? The republic, who was a founder republic of the Union, who willingly and completely free signed that agreement and formed the biggest second in the world country called Soviet Union, now calling this Soviet times the time of occupation. No, it's completely bullshit. It's not true. It's false, because Ukrainians was a member of big family of Soviet Union, and that was a leader of the Soviet Union economy and the culture and so on. So it was no occupation at all. And when World War II started, and Hitler, after the 2 years managed by Stalin peace, because Stalin completely understand that will be a war with Germany. How I know that? He ordered to great director, film director Sergei Eisenstein, to produce and to film the story of Alexander Nevsky. And that film, Nevsky, come out, Eisenstein filmed it in 1937, 1948, film was released, but very little, because on this time, 1939, that was a Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact already in place. They tried to not alienate the Germans with that big release, but they re-released the film on June and July of 1941, when World War II started. And that movie was about, actually, it's a very good film. It's a masterpiece. And if, my teacher, my dear friend, Oliver Stone, was inspired by Alexander Nevsky when he wrote the script for film Conan Barbarian. And even production design was taken from that film of Eisenstein. But the film was very big about what is a common roots for the all Russian people, for Slavs. What is unification? What is making them different civilization than European one? And I believe that Russian civilization is different because the way how they practice in their religion is different. They direct ancestors of Byzantine Empire, and Orthodox religion is direct, keeping and preserving clarity way how the Emperor Constantine established the Orthodox Church and a great Roman Empire. And the Byzantium was, people not call themselves Byzantines, they call themselves Romei, was mean people from Rome, and how that's related to Russia, because in the very end, Russia was all the time supporting for Byzantine Empire, but in the very end of empire existence, when the Ottoman Empire was rising and the Byzantine Empire was falling down, and it was a big tragedy because it was a very advanced society on a term of science and culture and religion, very educated, and the center of cultural exchanges. But when they failed, before that, the Sofia Paleolog was in arranged marriage to Russian Tsar Ivan III. The plan for people in the Vatican who was advocating for that was attempt to convert the Russian Tsar to be a Catholic. And unfortunately, they don't understand that Sofia Paleolog was Orthodox, and as soon as she crossed the border of Russia on the way to his future big husband, she started attending all Russian Orthodox churches and practicing in a very clear Orthodox way. So its plan failed, but the Sofia Paleolog brings with her 70 carriages of books, what included such a rare books, like a books what was from a great library of Alexandria and so on. That actually was a legendary and mystical foundation for the library of Ioan the Terrible, what until now not found, and it's like, you know, big treasure hunts about this. But she also bring the throne with a unicorn standing on the back, and the Russian coat of arms, two-headed eagles. So this is why the Russian way of monarchy was based on a Byzantine practice and united with believing in a God, in a way how Orthodox Church was not separated from a government, that was a part of the management society. And all of the things with the Sophia Paleolog marriage to Ivan III change. Oh, that, yeah, they live happily. She bring their 12 kids, 9 of them survive, and one grandkid to be the greatest Russian leader, Ivan the Terrible. It is called Ivan the Terrible in the English language. He has a different name in Russian, Grozny. And she also built the Kremlin as we know it, like because before that Kremlin was the wooden, and also she made from his husband, from just Moscow Duke, she made the Russian Tsar, really Tsar and Caesar. It's come from Byzantine Empire, and this is how the establishment of Russian Empire started. And from this time, the center of power, because of church and because of Byzantine heritage, move from Kiev to Moscow. Moscow more and more play more important role and be at center. And this is where when the Kiev go on a like a more like provincial role, not a center of power. And from that time, Moscow rise, and Kiev still keeping the name of mother of all Russian cities, but not be a real center of power. And it's, we know that from the history what's fight for who will be metropolitan of church in Kiev was all the time a game of power at this time. Bringing these stories to the Western audience, that's, you know, that's empty page here. Nobody know nothing about this. And then they don't know about cultural importance and history at all. I'm really sad about the knowledge of geography of Americans. They know very little because I believe they don't study this here in the school. But they also know very little about history. And the history of this part of the world not studied at all. And so Americans, they don't know the history of Soviet Union. They don't know what's happened before, what's happened after. So they know only, like, you know, rewritten the history from a point of view of American superiority in the world. And as the Soviet Union was our biggest enemy, because communists just they won't grab our property and run it for the government, and they established the Gulag in the United States. So nobody understand in contemporary, so that the biggest social experiment was Soviet Union run and fail was for something good, you know, to be in some better way of governance than exist before. So let's go back to Scott, because so when Scott started talking about Zelensky, this is a very important piece of work, because Zelensky trajectory from the candidate to president actor who want to make a peace and stop the war in Donbass. This is why 73% of his electoral base vote for him, not for President Poroshenko, who was compromised by all this, you know, making the war and money at the same time, and collaborating with Biden family, this firing the prosecutor general who tried to investigate Biden and Burisma dealings. And the Zelensky story was quick fall into that from this naive actor who was set to the power through the media operation, running the TV show for that, and to be a freedom fighter against Russia and the leader of the coalition of forces united to defend Ukraine against the Russian invasion. This is tremendous story because it's happened so fast, and it's lead to very horrible consequences, because if you have no statement in a position of leader of the country, you're dealing with all consequences, loss of sovereignty, etc., etc., etc. And the Scott film making good explanation for everybody in the West what is Zelensky is. I believe that subject need to be investigated more, because, and I think it's something else coming up, and because I cannot tell who and how, but I was helping another producers to make, I believe, 8 episodes about Zelensky, and it's, I believe, coming out soon.
That's very exciting.
I think one of the key things from the movie that stood out for me, and I think that is important and still is, albeit I think you said you touched upon it in one of your previous films, which is to say The Everlasting Present, that the key role actually of the Orange Revolution in helping set everything up. And I wanted us to touch briefly on that because it was something that is touched upon. Now, a lot of the film is about Zelensky, but part of how Zelensky got to be there was the Orange Revolution. And in particular, the character of Viktor Yushchenko, and especially his wife, are very interesting here to me because Katerina Yushchenko has a perfectly Ukrainian-sounding name, but she's not Ukrainian. At least not by nationality. She was born in Chicago, and you even unearthed a photograph of her when she was younger, throwing up a rather awkwardly angled, awkwardly angled salute, shall we say, with her right arm.
Yeah.
Quite so. But how is it that a man who, when he was president of the Bank of Ukraine, who had the Bank of Ukraine running a series of pyramid schemes that collapsed and therefore worsened the economic crisis in Ukraine, and who is married to a diaspora nationalist American woman, gets represented as being for democracy and clean government. So could you tell us a bit about perhaps the original Agent Zelensky, the original attractive, handsome face to make banderism acceptable?
Yeah, it's all started with a movement against President Kuchma, because they run the campaign funded from USAID, I believe, and National Endowment for Democracy, Ukraine without Kuchma. The brightest leader of this was a two personality. One of them was ex-prime minister, and before that, head of National Bank of Ukraine. Before that, head of Bank of Ukraine, commercial bank Ukraine, with a code name accountant, who suddenly, when he started rising to power, he was like, he felt that he is a messiah. He's have some mission for Ukrainians. And when he rise to the power and rising more and more, and he finally was noticed. And suddenly, when on his way to Washington, he sat on a close seat, same seats together with Katerina Chumachenko, who was a White House employee before that, worked for the State Department, and an American official who. And they fall in love. Yeah, it's never happened in a real life without carefully executed plan, invented in some corridors of Langley, Virginia, when how to set up the full control over the probably president of Ukraine, and how to set in motion the big plan to steer Ukraine out of Russian influence. So they planted Katerina Chumachenko on a neighbor seat in a plane. They start talking, and they start, and that's how mission is started. The Katerina Chumachenko from Ukrainian diaspora was a member of Plast, as youth organization, when they usually use that salutation as it was taught by Germans during the World War II. It's actively pro-national radical organization. I can call that Nazi organization, but it's they calling themselves for continue to the fight of heroes. And who's that heroes? You know, because it's funny when that everybody in the Western press starts saying that Slava Ukraine and glory to the Ukraine, glory to heroes. Who's that heroes? Huh. This is exactly Bandera, Melnik, Shukhevich, and others who brutally killed Poles and run the campaign of genocidal campaign. What's even German SS, Waffen-SS troops was afraid to carry this dirty job. So they outsourced it to Ukrainian nationalists, and they did it with pride. So this is actually that heroes. And in this ancestor of that, thanks that Katerina Chumachenko was planted in the inner circle of Yushchenko and be closest source of influence. And after that, they start funding this, and they arranged the color revolution in Ukraine 2004. When Viktor Yanukovych win the election, they bring 2 million people on the streets of Kiev, and mostly peacefully, using that poisoning Yushchenko for a cause to bring more, you know, people love wounded, people love the victims, and that's work for him. And thanks God, and this time of negotiation, of peaceful transition, when Yanukovych gave up, and Medvedchuk was managed to discuss and to implement the changes in the Ukrainian constitution and to bring more power to the prime minister of Ukraine. And immediately the person who we know as a Yulia Tymoshenko was elected by prime minister, and they start fighting together with Yushchenko. Economy go and slow down, and everything go very bad for that government. And after that second term, Yushchenko lose to Yanukovych, and he got only 5% of vote for him. This is how badly he's failed. So we managed to secure the interview with him because he knows nothing practically about my involvement in a film. If he knows I'm involved, it's never happened, never. But looking at Simona Mangiante in front of him, beautiful Italian-American, who know nothing about Ukraine, he started telling the stories of you. If you look just at this movie in the Yushchenko part, you will find very funny revelations. What actually later, when movie come out, he was blamed a lot by Ukrainian nationalists and radicals, by Nazi and all people in media Ukraine for conducting this interview for us, because he was duped. He was like blah blah blah. You know what? My personal feelings of message what Yushchenko tried to send to the West through our film was that West is impotent in to finish anything what they started. He feel completely abandoned in his outside of Kiev house. His wife not with him. His kids also grown up and not with him. He's alone, you know, abandoned messiah with dreams not coming true. And I believe he is thinking, and he's benefit a lot to bring in differences with Russia and to alienate Russia in his actions, like giving the status of hero of Ukraine to Stepan Bandera, what was immediately denounced by next president, showing his, and he is praising of Ukrainian nationalism as a way of fight for freedom, and he tells such a brutal lies like in all other. It's nothing radical, it's nothing violent in Ukrainian nationalists. They're not Nazi, they just fighting for their independence. We illustrated very well with a video B-roll to show the audience how the reality is different from Mr. Yushchenko vision. But this is how. And another thing was can help to help the West to bring down the Russian-leaning politics in Ukraine was ex-prime minister of Ukraine, Pavel Lazarenko, who was detained on an allegation of corruption, trying to enter the United States by using Panama passport. He was rebelling against President Kuchma and failed in this rebellion, served 7 years in the American prison, got the green card after that, and happily reside in, I believe, in San Diego now. What was happening with him? He was collaborating with FBI. He gave to FBI entire picture how the power structure is working in Ukraine, what his family is running, whom by whom, and what is the structure of power alliances and differences in Ukraine. So when the 2004 Orange Revolution was benefit tremendously from this. And of course, the role of we cannot underestimate the role of George Soros and other oligarchs. Even Boris Berezovsky, runaway Russian oligarch, mastermind like a Moriarty, the doctor of mathematics, and who was quite involved in the coming Putin to power in Kremlin, and who was advocating for this. And he was also the donor of Ukrainian revolution in 2004, because Ukrainians steal 20 million of his money. So this is how we know he was actively involved in funding. So the story of Ukrainian revolutions, this is a story of foreign involvement in completely without any control from the government. So the government in Ukraine, first of all, Ukraine has no visa regime for European and the Americans. Yushchenko did it. Second, they have no control over the funds, what's coming through the NGO. And they also start losing their influence in the media. So because the independent, so-called independent media start pumping up in 2014 and bring a needed component of media coverage to that social revolution. Yes, so that Zelensky story has roots and predecessors, and we can at least point out two of them. One of them was President Petro Poroshenko, who first fell in that lava. He was actually the agent of CIA and State Department, undisclosed, but I believe that he started working for CIA in the beginning of 2000. The second one before was Viktor Yushchenko, who was under complete control through his wife to the State Department and, of course, the CIA. And third was Zelensky, who's, I believe he has a handler. This is his chief of staff, Yermak. And Yermak, he's a big friend of Ambassador McFaul. And they're working together with him in a McFaul-Yermak commission to construct and set up the sanctions and to fight an informational war and economical war with Ukraine engaged. And through Yermak, they crafting and drafting all strategic communications of Agent Zelensky. And he just a speaker who delivering in a good Ukrainian language. What is he is not talking to his inner circle. This is empire of lie, you know. If you talk about Ukraine, I more and more see all signs of number 4 Reich and the Nazi authoritarian regime with no freedom of no basic human rights, no freedom of speech, no freedom of gathering, no freedom of parties, political expressions, and completely brainwashed and and they're using us only as a cannon fodder for proxy war, what United States need to run endlessly, because United States do not need the victory of Russia or victory of Ukraine. They want to have it conflict forever, because this is how United States military-industrial complex make all that money. They're not making the money from selling the armaments for the foreign governments. They're making the money from American taxpayers and from the printing machine who's printing the United States dollars in Washington, D.C.
I think you make a very good point, which is part of the reason why on this channel we sometimes say, instead of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, we say Ukrainian dictator Volodymyr Zelensky, because the society that he has helped create and shape himself, because in quite a short time, even more so than it was under Poroshenko, is a full-on authoritarian state with some attributes of totalitarianism. But it wasn't always that way. Before we get to Zelensky the dictator, let's talk about Zelensky the actor, and especially the role that got him elected. Can you tell us a bit about President Goloborodko and Servant of the People, and what purpose that served?
To come to this, I need to go a little bit more deeper in the Zelensky actor career. He is born in Kryvyi Rog. This is a city in the Dnipropetrovsk area, when I was also born and work on. So his first success was, it was a comedy competition called KVN. That's different teams competing with each other, and they built the team what's called Quarter of 95. It was very popular. Hey, they performed the tricks and they start doing this as a business. And he come to the movie theaters and as an actor and comedian, and he has an amplitude of comedian in films. And they make a few movies with an American director with Russian descent. No, as American director, but he called himself Russian, and Marius Weisberg. Marius, my good friend, and few of my well-known people who work for me work for him as well. I will not call the names, but and he made Zelensky as an actor notable, because in the actor career you need to be in a lead role and you need to have a commercial success for that. So they make different movies with Vladimir that call 8 First Dates, and Zhevsky against Napoleon, and Zelensky play Napoleon. He is very much matching to Napoleon character. And this is how Marius make him big actor. This is not Zelensky success. This is success of guy who is educated both countries, Russia and United States. Very, very good director for romantic comedies. And that's Zelensky make his name. And after that, he start working with funded by, owned by Kolomoisky TV channel 1+1. And they developed this TV series called Servant of People, when his character was a school teacher who was elected president and make radical changes to the life, because Ukrainians know all the power is corrupted very much in Ukraine. And to see that dream, it's never come true, because it's impossible to honest honest man be president of Ukraine, because first of all, he need to know how to deal with the sharks, how to keep intent the oligarchs and the bureaucracy. Zelensky has no knowledge of this completely. And of course, his character, Goloborodko, as well, performing such a tricks like, firing two Uzi from 2 hands in the parliament. It was quite a good prediction, because after he's make that parliament completely rubber stamped, and abuse all power in the Ukraine. Before that, he was an actor. And you know what's actor doing? Actor receiving the script and delivering the lines, and director approve it and help him to adjust it in a way how director and producer needed for the film. So his role is completely under subordination of director and a scriptwriter. This is exactly why it's a perfect choice for that all Westerners who run that Ukrainian proxy war, because you have a well-mannered, young, and good-looking, the so-called president, but he's not president. He's your actor who can deliver every line what you give to him. And this is why all stratcoms, strategic communications, written for Zelensky, not in Kiev, but written for him here in Langley. Okay, let's go back to movie Plast of Zelensky. I have my personal encounters with Vladimir in 2012 when one of my then partner tried to set us up together to make some remake for the feature animation. It's animation about Cossacks, the national folks heroes, and all different circumstances, how they play football, how they go for the salt, etc., etc. And they want to make a remake. We do not strike the deal because I was surprised, because we're supposed to finance the entire film, and they planning to get the 40% of profit for them, 20% for rights for remake, and left the 40% for us, and we need to do all the job. I was said, listen, this is ridiculous. We never work like that, and we're not gonna work. And you know what's also I'm noticed that all the time when I try to talk to Zelensky personally, he has a lot of excuses to postpone or reschedule because he's boarding the plane, he's stepping in the conference room, he has a huge conference call. So he was busy man. Because on this time, he ran, I believe, 5 or 7 businesses. He was a CEO of Channel 1+1. He was a chief of his production company called Quarter 95. He was an actor in the films. He was a stand-up comedian, and it's all together simultaneously. So he has practically no time, but he don't need the time. Kolomoisky has all time what he need, who financed that TV series and who owned the TV channel. And they planted and set up the character of president who's serving the people, and they run it. And people like it because it was funny, it was political, and it has a promising of dream catch scenario. So we have a president who take care about people, and that helped him a lot. And they even ran the season 4 during his campaign, and use it as a not calculated in a budget of campaign, a tool to help him to win. And don't underestimate that Poroshenko was completely corrupted man who associate in Ukrainian electorate with a war. So they want him off. The whole opposition was helping Zelensky, and of course they was disappointed after. There's only one person who stand against him in that election was into parliament was Viktor Medvedchuk, and of course they don't win this because the electorate of Viktor Medvedchuk party was mostly in Crimea and the eastern part of Ukraine, and in this time no Donbass, no Crimea, do not participate in this election in Ukraine. So they lose the electorate base. And of course, the people who was more on a national and radical, leaning the western part of Ukraine, they win an election. And it was, I believe, last chance to change the course of oncoming war in 2019. Window was closed, and after that, as we discussed it, and Oliver asked Viktor Medvedchuk during the interview, are you not afraid? Because it's looked like you will face a very hard couple of years in Ukraine. And Medvedchuk was courageous enough to say, no, I'm staying. I'm not going to run away of the country. And you know how it ended up. His political party was prohibited. His TV channels was closed. His own himself was arrested. And after that, put to the jail when the special operation started and tortured. And only the will of Vladimir Putin to keep his words and do not give up, they negotiate his release and release Azov leaders in exchange for Medvedchuk freedom. Drama, you know,
Yes.
real life drama.
I think I have a question then. I think something that you didn't cover in the movie, but let's keep focused on the movie, which is that you mentioned you saw, which is that you talk in the movie or through Scott about Scott Ritter about Ukraine possibly getting a nuclear weapon or thinking about that or scheming about that. And I think you have a clip of all people, it's either David Arahamia or Podolyak in June 2021 talking about we should get nuclear weapons. Then we could literally blackmail anybody to get whatever we want and they'd have to give it to us. Could you talk a bit about that and how you came across it? Because what I was astonished by when seeing what you put up on screen was how much of it was open source. Things that you don't need to dig too deep to find, or you don't need to go into some secret archive with some kind of security clearance. You can just, with a little bit of patience of looking on the internet and also on publicly available documents, make this case. How did you find that, and what is up with that?
So first of all, I'm studying this. I'm studying this for another film, the Origin of Budapest Memorandum, and that's how I make myself familiar with this very, very hard negotiation. What's happening until 1994, 3 years, sponsored by United States, Russia, Great Britain, because it was about nuclear legacy of Soviet Union. First of all, everybody agreed for such an unstable regime in a small country like Ukraine, Belarus, and Kazakhstan, that's dangerous to keep nuclear arsenal for them. For Nursultan Nazarbayev tell me this story in very much details when we work on the film Kazakh, The History of the Golden Man, and interview him. And that was hard position, but you know, I need to say that Nazarbayev negotiated much better conditions for his country, because I believe he negotiated $2 billion for uranium, what was in the warheads of this 104 rockets standing in Kazakhstan, and Ukraine has 459 rockets, and they got like something around 300 millions. So that was nothing. But Budapest Memorandum was signed, and what's happened during this memorandum? This just the process of justification, the Russia taking care about all nuclear legacy of Soviet Union and grabbing, because first of all, that was useless nuclear weapons without codes. It's impossible to break them. You need to redo completely system of initiation. It's nobody allow to Belarus or Ukraine or Kazakhstan to enter the nuclear club and to own their own nuclear football. So the idea of that Budapest Memorandum was that superpowers such as United States, Russia, and Great Britain give some kind of guarantee of security for countries who's giving up that nuclear arsenal and transferring that to Russia. That was very hard negotiation because such a lot of participants, and it's ended up in Budapest, and it was signed, and it was obligation. And everybody who sponsored that memorandum was finally happy because, you know, to have a free new members in the nuclear club can shape tremendously the balance of power into the world, because Ukraine at this time was the third country in the world after Russia and the United States and the numbers of strategic nuclear weapons. So Ukraine gave up nuclear capacity, and that was good for Ukraine, because in the other condition, if Ukraine do not give up, that will be completely isolated, prosecuted, and surrounded by economical sanctions and everything when this North Korea way, North Korea scenario. Ukraine don't want this, and of course they sign it, and they also conserve the capacity to produce, to enrich uranium, what was based in the scientific experience, and they also transfer leftovers of plutonium, weapon-grade plutonium, weapon-grade uranium to United States, as well as Kazakhstan. But Ukraine has industrial capacity to quickly redevelop the nuclear weapons. First of all, more than 30% of Ukrainian energy generated by nuclear reactors. It was a Chernobyl station, it was Zaporizhia, now it's a Russian one, Rovno, Khmelnytskyi in the South Ukrainian one. Second, Ukraine has capacity to enrich uranium. It's located in the Dnepro-Dzержinsk. Now it's called different name, but it's city close to the Dnepropetrovsk, and they call that Pridneprovsky chemical plants when they have a centrifuges and they can enrich uranium even much faster than the Iranians do. So they also has the scientific institute in Kharkov would have 2 reactors, and they can build all ignition system for the nuclear bomb, A-bomb, and they have the plant and in the Dnipropetrovsk, and who produced that ICBM, so they can deliver the vehicle for delivery of nuclear weapons. So when the Russians know that, and everybody know that, so Ukraine has capacity, industrial capacity to regain the nuclear legacy. And when on 19th of February, Zelensky at a Munich Security Conference in his speech mentioned that all Budapest memorandum is falling apart and there's no security guarantee left for Ukraine. Oh, how that's falling apart? Ukraine signed a Minsk Agreement 1, Minsk Agreement 2 never implemented. Just do everything, just not implement it, but build up the forces without the military. So the Zelensky pretending that Budapest memorandum doesn't work anymore, and the memorandum cover only nuclear aggression, so protecting from the nuclear weapons, not from the convenient one. And I believe his statement that the Budapest memorandum doesn't work at all was a last steps what Ukrainian regime did to provoke Russian actions. Because imagine Ukraine regaining the nuclear power with the help or without, build up the forces and start attacking Donbass and Crimea as they have a plan. That was a plan. And with 3 weeks of tremendous escalation and firing shots, that was a last step in a chain of actions of provocation of Russia to think differently about their security and to start using the hostile actions. And because Russia say it out loud, so if we will not get security from our Western partners, that will be a measures of military and technical means. I mean, they call that military measures, but we understand what it means when if it's about the Russian security, and they understand they will have their situation on a battlefield because Crimea is isolated. So they will fight for that. The Putin cannot allow to lose Crimea and to betray a will of 2.7 million people who on the referendum choose to join Russia. And that was a very big deal for him. And military advisors, I believe, tell to Vladimir Putin that will be very much complicated if Ukraine start that war, and without the corridor to supply Crimea by the land, that will be only Black Sea, and will be massacre in the Black Sea that will be huge and very, very dangerous military complications. This is why when Ukraine finally crossed all the lines and entertain openly idea to regain the nuclear legacy and to get the nuclear capacity, what I estimate from 6 to 9 months from the time of decision making to real deployment Ukraine needed. And imagine what will we have on hands if that terror state of Ukraine has ability to blow the nuclear device at least 20 kilotons. That will be disaster, you know. Of course, they're not gonna blow. They're gonna blow to cause as much as more media effect. This is why. And yeah, this is how what I call the anatomy of provocation of Ukraine did to start that war. Yeah. We can go maybe to questions if we have something from audience what they want to cover.
Yeah.
We do.
Go ahead, Lydia. Take it.
No, you go ahead.
No, I can't find them. Hold on. Okay. In your view, how do these alleged relationships between Zelensky and the Western powers shape the current geopolitical dynamics between Ukraine, Russia, and the West?
Zelensky is a talking head in this relations. Zelensky perfectly suited for West because he is an actor, and he delivering all speeches what they give to him, and they also take all blames if something go wrong. This is how the West using Zelensky, and they want a proxy war, they want endless war because it's benefit for military-industrial complex, and they want to weaken Russia. They want to arrange around Russia a ring of fire, as the Rand Corporation research and report showing. So the Zelensky fit perfectly for this role. Obedient actor, B minus, B plus on the quality of his acting, Jewish, and not questioning any decision what's made on a Potomac River. So he's perfect choice until he got the rebellious, and I believe we already see that signs when Zelensky was in a conflict with before the Vilnius summit of NATO, and he started blaming the Great Britain and the Ministry of Defense, etc., etc. This is first signs what the actor so deep in his character, he's forget what script is written not by him, and director of the show not him but other people. So and this is kind of chance to suddenly fall out of favor if he will continue this. I see he's backing up a little bit on this. He understands the freedom of leader of free world cannot bite the hands what given him food and armaments and everything. And this is how, but you know, the Zelensky hope is doomed because he's cornered. From one side, he has Russia with all Russian military might. On another side, he has Ukrainian nationalists who never allow him to sign the peace with Russia. And also, he has a masters. And the goals of West in Ukraine completely different than goals of Ukraine. They don't need victorious victory of Ukrainian troops. They need an endless war. This making the position of Zelensky is very complicated in the nearest future because, first of all, he cannot deliver what he promised. Second of all, West in charge for decision making. As soon as the administration sitting in White House will change or change the mind, it will be totally different course of action in Ukraine. And endless support, as Secretary Blinken, we need to ask ourselves why the White House and the State Department keep repeating this word. We will support Ukraine endlessly. We will support. We committed. So they never mentioned Ukraine victory. They mentioned support. That means the military deliveries and the financial support for Ukraine. So they never. So goals of people in the State Department and the White House is totally different than goals of Mr. Zelensky, and so then deeper the conflict will go, then deeper than differences will emerge. This is my answer. Let's go next.
You're so bossy. Let's go next. All right. Okay. I do have this one. Actually, I'm interested in. It is, during your research for Agent Zelensky, were there any surprising facts or insights you discovered that didn't make it into the final film?
Yes. This is a money laundering machine for next Biden campaign. What unfortunately we cannot prove and have not time to validate it in more details, but it's all about the cryptocurrency fallen entities. And we know that, but Scott tried to concentrate on something more available for illustration, like real estate of Zelensky in different parts of the world, Miami, Great Britain, etc. That I believe that's much more bigger and much more interesting scam is hidden, and we cannot prove it yet. So we have some facts, but it's, I believe, the cause for the goal for the next movies about this.
I myself have a final question, but it's a question from me, not from our audience. And it has to do actually with one of the issues that you also touched upon in the movie. And that is, of course, that what is going on with, and it's an episode that we were going to bring you on for, but we didn't have time. And that is what's going on with the Orthodox Church. And so who is behind that, and what is up with that? Because I've had my jaw on the floor looking at the official persecution of the Orthodox Church and wondering, I'm sorry, was I suddenly transported back to the mid-18th century?
Yeah. This has a history as well in Ukraine, because the Orthodox Church in Ukraine, first of all, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church completely independent, but they working through the Moscow Russian Orthodox Church and Patriarchate, and they not prizing this all Zelensky campaign. So before that, President Poroshenko decided to establish the fake church called Ukrainian Ukrainian Orthodox Church, and they go to Patriarch Bartholomew, who's sitting in I believe in Constantinople, and Istanbul, and they buy both from him the Thomas, so the rights to announce the autocephalic independent Ukrainian Orthodox Church, but not the Russian Orthodox Church. And they start immediately do the church grabbing. So they grab the real estate, the buildings, and without God inside of that building, this is just the real estate. This is not a church. This is not a religion. And final act of this was the Kievo-Pecherska Lavra, what is the heart of Orthodox Church of Ukraine, Russian Orthodox Church in Ukraine, and the Minister of Culture, who is a right hand of appointee of Kolomoisky, Alexander Tkachenko, and a good friend of Zelensky, because Tkachenko was also the CEO of Channel 1+1 before Zelensky, or before Zelensky term. So they start attacking that church, and because they cannot do it in a civil court, they use the criminal provisions and they start prosecuting the Orthodox priests and do horrible crimes. And this is how that they try to diminish the influence of peacekeeper influence of Russian Orthodox Church in Ukraine. And the church still empty. There's nobody going in there because people believe in God. They don't believe in the state. And that the state is so brutally fighting against church. This reminds me the Third Reich of Adolf Hitler, and all other religions was not approving the course of action of Nazi, was banned and prohibited and prosecuted. That's exactly the same. That's exactly the same shit.
I think that's a very powerful way to conclude.
Yeah. And we don't need to forget that Patriarch Bartolomeo completely on payroll from CIA, so he's under the State Department guidance. So he did whatever he's told to do. So as well as Zelensky. This is a three big sources what they need to attack. They need to attack the language, they need to attack faith, and they need to attack culture. So that's in the Russian songs. It's unbelievable shit. Russian songs prohibited to play it loud in Ukraine. You cannot play it loud songs. Russian language is banned, and the old bureaucrats and apparatus, they call speak English. You need to understand what masters demand from you. So you need to study English. All bureaucrats, all state apparatus need to know at least minimum English. Okay, now sit down, stop, do that. Funny, yeah? But this is official. English language must be known because it is language communication language now in Ukraine. And what else? Language done, culture. Oh, culture, yeah, you cannot play the Russian song. All movies banned from all movies produced by Russia and the Russian language, they banned in Ukrainian TV channels and the platforms. They don't have them. So this is attack on all. They also has an attack on Christmas. They stole the Christmas, and they announced that now Ukraine will celebrate the Christmas not on the 7th of January as usual, but on a Western way on the 24th, 25th of December. And
yeah, but now you can make a new movie. It'll be like The Grinch Who Stole Orthodox Christmas.
Yeah.
Zelensky.
Yeah. It's a good point for comedy, yeah.
Well, I mean, it's true. There's always an element of truth.
Perfect Grinch. Perfect Grinch, yeah.
It really is. Well, my hope is that, and from what I see, and we post videos on our channel from Ukraine, and we see that even though there is this war being waged against everything Russian, we see that there are still enough people in Ukraine who cherish their heritage and they understand who the enemy is. So I guess that's our hope.
I also want to point out one a little bit different subject. How many Ukrainians left in Ukraine? Because when
that's a good point.
Yeah, because the Soviet Union broke apart, that was 55 million of Ukrainians living in Ukraine. If you look now, the closest number was provided by Viktor Medvedchuk in his article what he wrote, and it's around 19.4 million Ukrainians left. They calculated Crimea out, Donbass out, that new region out, people exodus from Ukraine before, from 2014 to 2022, that was average amount of 1 million Ukrainians left Ukraine by official statistic. Calculating all of this and giving us at the straight numbers 19.4. So that's mean more Ukrainians abroad than Ukrainians in Ukraine. And if people in abroad still holding Ukrainian citizenship and still hold, as for example I am, they still can vote. So I believe that's a next political possibility, because it's more Ukrainians abroad than inside of country. This is how to vote out Zelensky by Ukrainians who is not under his direct control and who has a chance to speak freely. You know, this is a big one opportunity, what I believe soon will be raised very much. And on this optimistic note, I believe we're coming to the end.
Yes,
And
thank
I
you
will
so
have
much.
a breakfast. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And we'll have dinner, I guess. Well,
Yeah.
I'll have dinner. And yes, thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. We learned a lot. We're sure that our listeners will also learn a lot. Everyone go watch the movies. We will link all of them, I think, because I'm pretty sure that I found all of them on Rumble, and let's hope that they stay on there and nobody
Yeah.
deletes them.
Yeah, the Ukrainian
And
Fire still, please mention Ukrainian Fire on Amazon. That provide a little cup of coffee for producers who still benefit from some kind of licensing fee.
yes,
It's easy to find. Yeah, Amazon. On Amazon, we have Ukrainian Fire and we have the Everlasting Present and the Maidan Massacre. They take down only revealing Ukraine because they're afraid to all our Biden revelation, what is in that film. And yeah, watch the films, educate yourself. This is the only way to survive.
yes, everyone who can do it, go on Amazon. Us poor Russians who don't have access to anything Western, we will watch on Rumble. So, but yes, everyone watch them because they're really wonderful. And subscribe to our channel, subscribe to our Substack. We work really hard on there, and we try to post very smart, important things about everything that is happening around the world. And thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, dear audience. Come more.